Speaking of hot-button issues, the debate over Israel's refusal to entry to United States Congresswomen Omar and Tlaib continues today, as the controversial Democratic politicians are now doubling down in their accusations of bigotry against the Jewish state. Though ironically, in their charge against Israel's alleged racism, both Omar and Tlaib relied on an anti-Semitic cartoon published by Brazilian-Lebanese cartoonist Carlos Latouf, an artist who, in 2006, proudly placed second in Iran's annual Holocaust cartoon contest. And here now with more on the subject, we have in the studio Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Marc Schulman, columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, and via Skype we have Ben-Dror Yemini, Israeli journalist and author of Industry of Lies. Thank you, all three of you, for being with us today.
Pleasure.
So, Ben-Dror, I actually kind of want to start with you. Is there any way that Israel comes out looking good in this situation, or, you know, what's going on? How do you look at this situation?
I'll tell you. Okay. We have to distinguish between two questions. The first question is, what is the story? What the story here is that actually, if you look at the background, you see that the United States did not let a Knesset member from Israel, Michael Ben-Ari, to get a visa. They did it. I mean, how can that the United States is complaining against Israel when the Democrats were in power, they did not let a Knesset member? One. Two, even a state like Poland did not let the foreign minister of Turkey, just because they were afraid that he's going to make some other things which are not nice. And let me tell you, even the NGOs that invited the two congresswomen, which is Miftah, the head of Miftah, Hanan Ashrawi, was blocked from entering the United States. So, I mean, how can you complain about Israel? How can somebody say that this is the end of democracy and that kind of, that's what states are doing? And you cannot show me one state on earth that will let somebody in that is against the very existence of the state.
So but do you think that is coming off? Or because it seems here, based on the rhetoric, that Omar and Tlaib are coming out ahead of this, that this is all, in a sense, going right in, playing right into their hands.
Well, can I jump in here?
Sure.
Yeah. But by the way, the conclusion is not that Israel did the right thing. I mean, we have to know the background, but it doesn't mean that that Israel did the right thing. I think that, first of all, we have to say all of it. And then we did not have to come to the conclusion that Israel should bar the two congresswomen.
All right, well, Dr. Sherman, what's your take on
it? Let me say, the remedy that you're looking for depends on correct diagnosis of the malaise. And what we're seeing here with this incident with Omar and Tlaib is merely a severe symptom of an ongoing malaise. This is the failure of Israel over decades to present its case forcefully to the world, and the phlegmatic performance of Israel's public diplomacy, which has capitulated to the dictates of political correctness rather than political truth and factual accuracy.
Okay, that's completely nonsense.
No, that's not nonsense at all. Excuse me. Excuse me. To support the establishment of the Palestinian state is to support the establishment of yet another homophobic, misogynistic.
I want to hear his response.
It's irrelevant.
Why would anyone who
Sherman,
liberal values support such a thing?
And why is Sherman, let him respond, please.
Okay, the reality is simple. Look, we just fell right into Donald Trump's trap. Everything is true. The fact of the matter is, these are not particularly friendly people. They're not good people. Yes, our diplomacy has always been poor. We've spent not enough on Hasbara. But of course, we also have to recognize the fact we do occupy people, and it doesn't look good. I don't care what we do. I don't care whether it's right or wrong. I don't care whether it's right. No, it doesn't look good. It's not good. There's no way it's good. It doesn't make a difference whether we. It doesn't make a difference. It does not make a difference whether right is on our case or not.
Oh, really?
Yes, it doesn't look good.
Are you listening to what you're saying? Are you listening to what you're saying?
Sherman, let him finish and then respond. Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't make a difference what right or wrong. It doesn't look good. And generally doesn't look good. Now, the fact of the matter is, you have your talking points. That's all you have. Now, the reality is we fell into President Trump's trap. He said it for us. He put it in place, and we fell right in it. We made the wrong decision tactically for us. It's much better to be smart than right. And we may or may not have been right, but we were definitely not smart. And there's no way we can win this argument, because the reality is the visuals are terrible. And we knew they would be terrible, and the Israeli government had decided to let them in. And the only reason we didn't let them in was because President Trump forced us not to.
Respond, and then I'll come back to Ben-Dror.
Perhaps one of the remarkable things was AIPAC coming out against the decision. Now, the question that should be put very bluntly to AIPAC is, would you invite Omar Tlaib to come and speak?
Omar
at your, No, Omar, the Congresswoman.
Omar and Tlaib. Okay.
Yeah, Omar and Tlaib to address your AIPAC annual conference. Of course, they would never. So why would AIPAC demand that we let them in when they wouldn't let them in?
Because we said we were going to let them in. That's why. It's like everything else. It's our own. We did it.
They didn't know what the itinerary was.
They knew exactly what the itinerary was. They knew 100% what the itinerary was. The only reason they changed their mind was because of President Trump.
Well, I'm going to turn back now to Ben-Dror. Ben-Dror, what's your take on this? Because, and we touched upon it here a little bit, on the back and forth between Dermer and Israel Katz, Foreign Minister Katz, and kind of all this back and forth about whether or not they actually submitted their plans, their itinerary, etc.
No doubt that Israel made a lot of mistakes. But somebody in the studio said that Israel cannot be only right, but Israel should be also smart, which is completely correct. I agree. But most people do not even know that Israel is completely right. So yes,
precisely. Good point.
Eventually, yes, Israel should let them in because of many other reasons. But it doesn't mean that Israel is not allowed to bar this kind of people who are supporting the BDS, who are supporting the destruction of Israel.
I would have no problem.
That's exactly what democratic states do. If the United States is doing it, if Holland is doing it, if Germany is doing it,
the UK bought Wilders and Pamela Geller.
But the problem here is not
Israel is allowed, but it doesn't mean that it was clever to do it. But first of all, we have to know that we are right, and we have to explain that we are right, and we have to explain that we have the right to do it, even if eventually we are not doing it.
But the fact of the matter is, it's almost impossible to explain it. The fact of the matter is, yes, we may be right.
Well,
and yes, I
want to challenge this. Hold on. Why is it impossible to explain that the BDS movement is predicated, is based on...
It would have been absolutely fine if at the very beginning, when they first requested it, we had a public discussion, and we said all along that the BDS movement is predicated on destruction, and therefore we're not going to allow someone who supports our destruction to come into Israel. We could have forced them to answer the question, do you support the destruction of Israel or do you not, et cetera, et cetera. But no, we didn't do that. We made a decision. The government of Israel met and made a decision to allow them into the country. We told them we were going to allow them into the country. We told the heads of the Congress we were going to allow them into the country. We told the world we were going to allow them into the country. And then at the last moment, because of pressure from President Trump, we made a 180-degree turn.
Now, when you say that there was pressure from President Trump, are you saying, was there something that came out that proves this beyond a reasonable doubt?
Okay, first yes. There was the private pressure that, of course, was reported by Barak Ravid, but leave that part aside. There was a public tweet an hour and a half before the announcement was made where he said Israel will be weak and be making a mistake if allowed to do it. He said that publicly. And an hour later, the decision was made not to allow them in. You can't be more, it's a smoking gun that's below, it's for fire. It's not even in smoking.
Final comments, and then we have to cut it, unfortunately.
So what are you, anti-Trump or pro-Israel?
I'm both. Oh, yeah. But the fact of the matter is, I think being pro-Trump is being anti-Israel in this case. And I think our long-term disaster is being identified 100% with President Trump. And that's what's happening at the moment.
So basically, you think we should support the establishment of a mega Gaza overlooking Greater Tel Aviv? That's in our interest?
No, that's not in our interest.
But that's what they support. That's what they support.
I do not support them. I oppose them. I think Omar is one of the worst congresswomen for us and for the world, but that has nothing to do with our own strategy. We have to be smart, not right.
Unfortunately,
why is it not smart to not let people who exploit it to discredit
they can
Israel?
exploit it better from abroad than they are from
inside. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we've hit time, but thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, if I can, only one sentence.
The very, very, very last few words.
Scott Fitzgerald said that in some situations, very rare situations, both sides are right. This is one of those situations.
All right. Well, with that, unfortunately, we'll have to call it an end. Ben-Dror, Yemini, thank you for joining us via Skype. Dr. Sherman and Marc Schulman, thank you both very much for coming to the studio today.